I look at them as victims. They're victims because most of them were sat in front of TVs and brainwashed into eating this garbage. They were given baby bottles of Dr. Pepper or whatever when they were, infants, sent off to school with snickerdoodles or whatever garbage their parents gave them, and then processed food, pizza for dinner. And so by the time they're adults, their brains are so indoctrinated to that food because we are really led around by our brains. And you would think that the human brain would be smart enough to say, hey, I could use some real food up here, but it's not. It doesn't work like that. We're all driven by neurotransmitters, which are happy chemicals, brain chemicals. And so when someone eats this highly refined food, carbohydrates like a pizza or something like that, turns into sugar immediately into their brain so they feel better. They feel happy because they get a little dump of serotonin. But then you get the roller coaster dive because that food has to be stored away immediately because you can't have too much blood sugar in your bloodstream. And then all of a sudden they've got the craving again. And so this goes on for people all day long. And so then they go on a diet, right? And then their brain's working against them again because the brain is programmed for survival. So once you use up all your ready stores of energy in your muscles and your liver, the brain's going to start screaming in such a way that usually people cannot resist. They may be able to go a week or two or something like that. And then they are programmed to overeat. And this was demonstrated in the most brilliant study, and I'm always blown away that nobody else but me talks about it because it was so amazing. It was the semi-starvation study that they did at the University of Minnesota right at the end of World War II because they knew that they were going to have a lot of people on their hands to deal with who were starving, and they wanted to understand the mechanisms of starvation. So they took conscientious objectors who they wanted to contribute to the war effort, but they didn't want to fight and kill people. So they put these guys who were in their early 20s, this was like in, let's say, 1943-ish, and they put them on 1,800 calories a day. And back then, that was considered semi-starvation because people were eating a lot more food back then because they were eating real food and they were moving around a lot more, like doing farm chores and things like that. So after 6 months, these normal, healthy, completely psychologically sound guys had wigged out completely. They were hiding and hoarding food. They were binging. They were obsessing about food. They were doing weird things like putting weird combinations of food together, mixing it together. They were digging through garbage pails. They had really gone off the deep end because of this semi-starvation. So this is analogous to what's happening with people today. I mean, I know lots of people who were anorexic and bulimic, which is the same exact characteristics that were demonstrated by these conscientious objectors at the end of the 6-month trial semi-starvation study. And so what we do now with this population, we've got millions of people on diets and millions of people who are hiding food, who are hoarding food, who are obsessing about food, that their whole life is food, 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 whether they're dieting or not dieting. And so what do you do about that? That's the question. What do you do about that? In my opinion, what's happening now is that this population of people who are demonstrating these behaviors, who are grossly overweight, are not only wreaking havoc on their brains because they're dieting intermittently, but also because they're eating factory-produced food, which is not recognized as nutrition by their brains. And so they're demonstrating the same behaviors that these semi-starvation conscious objectors demonstrated in this semi-starvation study. So the solution is, if you want to lose weight and you've been on this roller coaster yo-yo dieting thing your whole entire life, what you need to do is you need to suck it up and do what Americans have always done and demonstrate a little bit of backbone and some courage and push away that pizza and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Cheerios and Trix and all this stuff that's making you fat and crazy, and start eating real food. Have bacon and eggs for breakfast. Have a fish and salad for dinner, for lunch. Have steak and a baked potato and some green beans for dinner. So I hope that makes sense, because if more people did that, they wouldn't even have to diet. Within a year, they would be a normal size, they would be healthy, they would be happy, and they would be just, that whole thing could be behind them for good.
Yeah, people used to eat that way, not even like a generation ago or a couple of generations ago. That's the way people ate. And they ate real food, And so this is all, a lot of this consumption of this highly processed food, just becoming predominant in people's diets. That's a relatively new thing, wouldn't you say?
It is new, and so is 2/3 of the population being obese. That's new.
Yeah. Wow.
And so if you look at that, you have to say, okay, there's a causal factor here. We can see it. It's really evident. We don't need a study to show us that eating Cheerios for breakfast is going to make you fat eventually. And I'm sure there's people out there who say, well, I eat Cheerios for breakfast and I'm not fat. There are some people who can skate through. There are some people who can get through eating processed food and they don't get fat. That's 1/3. That's 1/3 of the population. The rest of the 2/3 cannot do it. And so what does that say for our future generations? Does that mean that 1 out of every 100 person is going to be a normal size? I think it's pretty scary and sad.